This lesson we're just going to extend the AuthService to actually have a login function right here. So we want to be able to log in next lesson, and we pretty much just do that by making a login function. It's very easy. Now to do this, we need to add some properties in the login function. An email of the type string. Let's just spell that right. Email of the type string. That's what we need. And then we also need a password of the type string. There we go. Now we need these two to kind of log in. And again, when you see crazy lint stuff like this, I just normally just make a few spaces, clean up, and normally it goes away. Okay, what else do we need? Well, we also need to kind of say now, to do this, we need to use the fire auth service, we need to call the auth, we need to sign in and retrieve data with email and password. That's a long method, but it works. So I'll send in an email and I'll send in a password, and I'm kind of done, right? Now I've logged in. Now TS-Lint, will you please stop trying to help me? I just want a clear space right there. Thank you. Good. So this is kind of what I want to do. But notice right here when I mouse over, it says you're getting a promise back. That promise, you're not using that for anything right now. Now I could start saying, okay, I'll use the promise right here. I'll just say, when you're done getting the user, what should we do? We should say user, maybe console log this user, right? Console log user. But notice what I'm doing right here is I'm kind of limiting myself for people, or limiting the people who want to kind of use my login service, right? Or my auth service with the login, because what they're pretty much doing is they're making so that I cannot from the outside start listening for errors, and I cannot do whatever I want with the user, right? So I'm kind of limiting the people using my function right here. So this is not normally how we do it. Instead, what I want to do is I want to provide the promise to whoever is using my service. And I do that very simply by just returning the promise right here. So I'll say, when you're done, just return the promise so that others can decide to use it, right? Now when I do this, normally you also should just explain to the system that you're going to return a promise, and it's going to be of any type right now, right? So you're just explaining to your system that whenever you call this function, a promise will be returned and you can do whatever you want with it. Now that pretty much means that now in the login component, in the init function right here, I can actually call this function. But to do that, you need to kind of dependency inject your auth service. So let me just do that right here. Private auth service, like this, and that's of the type auth service. Now this is the first step to kind of start using my auth service, and that's fine. So now I should be able to say this.authService.login, and then I can just hard code an email and password right here, ljb@ljb.dk. I think that was the name of my email. And then I can add a password here. I think that was 1234556. Don't tell anyone. Now the cool thing is, even though I'm using this service, it still knows that the promise is returned. So now I can pretty much just add the then and the catch keyword in here. That's very awesome, because maybe I want to use this login in here for something, but somewhere else I want to use the login and the promise for something completely different. This provides the functionality so that whenever I want to use the login function on my service, I can then use the promises for whatever I want, right? This is very sweet. So good, now we are using the promise, and notice the promise will actually execute the login as soon as I call this function, meaning that as soon as this function right here is called, it's actually executed right away, kazoom, and then it sends the data back to me when it's logged in. And when it is logged in, the promise says, when this is completed, then I'll call this function. Or if something goes horribly wrong, then I'll call this function. That's kind of the work of the promise, or this callback that we set up right here, meaning that I will execute the code. If something goes bad, I'll call the catch. If everything goes well, I'll call the then keyword. That's a promise. We're going to change it into observables later, but that's a promise. And again, very important that you notice, as soon as I call this login, this guy will be called, and as soon as this is called, the service is executed. I cannot stop it. I cannot say, oh man, I changed my mind, I'll cancel this. You cannot do that with a promise. You can do that with observables, but not with promises. Sweet. So now we have the login component. I need to do one more thing. I know that. I need to add the auth service as a provider inside my module. So if you don't do that, you'll get a provider exception. So I'll just make a small new field in my module right here, and I'll just add the auth service down here in the providers. That should work. So notice sometimes you might have to restart, because look at this. It doesn't find login on auth service. That does exist. The login is right here. So sometimes you'll have to just restart your system, do another ng serve right here, give it a few seconds and let it start up. And when it's started, let's just try and go in here. When I go to the login page now, it tries to log in. It actually succeeds, and the user is now signed in. I can even get some information about the provider type. In this case, it was a password provider. I can also get information about the actual user, the email, and actually also the user ID. Those are the two most important ones. So we'll start looking at that in the next lesson. Now notice there's also a lot of other things here that you can actually add directly to your Firebase user account, but we're going to create a new user in the database, so we'll just skip those for now. So see you in the next lesson where we'll have even more fun. Now you've tried to use your login service and used the login services promises to kind of just console log information. See you in the next lesson. Have fun.